Today on the Save It for Parts channel, we've found an abandoned steam train in the woods of Alaska. Today we are out at Alaskan Cove in southeast Alaska at Gypsum, the former mining town for the rock of the same name. And you can already see some nice caves along the creek here. Not sure how many of these are natural caves and how many are little mine prospects, but they look pretty cool. And you can also see some of the rail from the old steam railroad that came up here. And this is kind of what I'm looking for. There's supposed to be an old steam locomotive somewhere back in this creek. So we're going to go see if we can find it. This was the town site of Gypsum between about 1902 to 1923. A company from Washington State ran the mine and the railroad, and they would haul rock out to an ore dock on the beach here. I'll put in some historic photos and maps of the property as we go along. It was a fairly large operation for its time. The gypsum was used for plaster and wallboard, basically like sheetrock today. And they had over a mile of narrow gauge track and at least one 12-ton HK Porter locomotive. Oddly enough, I think the locomotive in the creek here is not the one seen in historic photos, so the mine either had more than one or they swapped them out at some point. The actual mine tunnels were mostly under the creek, under Gypsum Creek, and they apparently connected to natural caves that were full of water. So the mine was pumping out 1,000 gallons per minute by 1921, and that's what made them shut down. The cost to run the pumps and bring in coal to run the steam pumps was just too much. So it's a beautiful area back in here, just tons and tons of moss and pretty forest. Not all of the creatures of the forest are very pretty though. For example, Stefan just found a banana slug, which these are disgusting and they're huge. Like that's literally how big that is. Here's another of these banana slugs. These seem to be more common on certain islands. We never really saw these back at my hometown of Thunder Bay. So this is probably a bear trail through here. That's this nice wide trail. This looks like where bears would come through. And the railroad would have come through right here. The old steam train, I think, would have come right through this area. And everything is so overgrown with moss and lichen and all kinds of stuff. So it's really hard to see any human remnants, any old artifacts. Now this is why they call it a rainforest, because it rains pretty much constantly here in southeast Alaska. We've gotten super lucky on this trip that it has not been pouring rain the whole time. But you can see how rainy it is normally because everything is green, everything is overgrown, everything is mossy. And it makes it really hard to find any old artifacts, any old trains or buildings. For example, there used to be a company town right in here. This is the old town site of Gypsum. And you can kind of barely tell that there used to be something here because it's cleared out. It's not fully forested. So you can sort of tell there was a town here, but none of the buildings are remaining. Can't even really make out where the railroad line was because the rail line supposedly went up along the creek here, sort of along the bank. And there's the creek, and actually, oh, there we go. Right there, that is a steam locomotive upside down in the creek. So that right there is what we're looking for. So here we are. This is an abandoned narrow gauge steam locomotive in the middle of the wilderness in Alaska. This is obviously in very rough condition, many parts missing, but you can still make out what it is. We've got the steam cylinders. We've got a wheel, a leaf spring. We've got a boiler on what used to be the top. And then this would be the driver's cab, or the operator's cab back here. We can see the firebox door under all this grass. And another wheel. Now, I would love to identify this thing somehow, find the construction number, find a serial number, figure out what train this was, because there were several possibilities here. I think there were actually 2 locomotives used at Gypsum, and one of them I think is underwater in Canada. There was a barge accident on the way out for repairs and they sank one of these. And I think this might be the second locomotive. I believe it's an HK Porter. I'm not 100% sure. I'm sure somebody has stolen the boiler door here that would have the name on it. And then there would have been a plaque or a maker's plate on the side that identified it. And that's walked off. It's possible there's another one on the other side, but it's kind of buried here. So yeah, I don't think there's a plaque down there. Got a little salmon fry stool here in the pond. I think that's what little brown guys are. Well, the kid probably cookie rolls for some reason. There probably also would have been a saddle tank for water on this thing, which has disappeared, either floated away on high water or somebody stole it to use as a water tank. And I'm sure other pieces have walked off over time, but yeah, there it is. Little train in the woods, disappearing back into nature, being overtaken by the moss and the logs and the grass. In another few years, you probably won't be able to find this thing again. So the locomotive is right there down in the creek. So the track would have come along the top of the creek here and probably gone this way back to the mine. We're not going all the way back to the mine today. I think it's at least a mile back, and it's pretty overgrown. I've heard there's not a whole lot left at the mine site. Yeah, this looks like quite a bit of erosion along the bank here, a lot of trees down. And yeah, I'm kind of losing the trail here. It's getting much more overgrown, many more ferns. You can tell some critters have come through here. It's a little smashed down. But yeah, I was kind of hoping to find more of the track. That probably got stolen back in the day. People came in and pulled the track out, pulled the cars out to use at other mines, and then probably just left the locomotive there because it was too big to steal or too rusty to steal, or had some other issue that kept it from being moved off to another mine. Yeah, this is getting thick in here. Yeah, another big trail, lots of animal trails through here. This is pretty remote. This is far away from any town or village. There's really nothing here anymore. The old town site of Gypsum was never really inhabited other than for the mine. And once the mine shut down, which was mostly due to flooding, the shafts would fill with water. They're in soft gypsum rock, which is really porous, and the shafts were basically under the creek. So the creek would flow down through the groundwater into the mine, flood the shafts, and make it impractical to keep mining. They pumped them out a few times, and then eventually they just gave up. They were having to import tons of coal from Seattle to run the steam pumps. There is some local coal on Admiralty Island across the channel, but it was not really cost effective to bring that over, and it wasn't very clean burning coal. Oh, speaking of coal, here's a part of a stove maybe, or a scoop. I can't tell if that could be part of the locomotive, or that could be part of a building that was here. Anyway, it became too expensive to run that mine, and they just gave up. Parked the train here, left it, and it's still here. There's another old piece of metal, some kind of pipe. Things rot very quickly here, so it is very difficult to find modern day ruins in Southeast Alaska, because an entire town looks like this after 100 years of neglect, mold, mildew, rot, moss. And of course people probably came in and salvaged any good lumber as soon as the miners left. And I'm actually writing a book on small railroads in Alaska, including this one, so I will have some old historic photos of that in the book and old information about it, old maps. So if you're into old abandoned trains and oddball little railroads in Alaska, little mines and cannery railroads and things like that, I will definitely have that book out at some point, hopefully in 2025, but we'll put some links down below or on the main channel when that gets done. It's been a long process to get the book done. Yeah, a few of us came up here to check it out. If you haven't kept up with my channel, we've rented a boat for about 9 days here in Southeast Alaska. We've got a little salmon fry school here in this pond. I think that's what the little brown guys are. When I was a kid, we called these quick eels for some reason, and we would kind of catch them in the creeks and put them in a little pond by the house and try to raise them, and of course they always escaped. So we're going back down the creek here towards the beach, and you can see some of those gypsum caves, or I'm still not 100% sure if these are natural sea caves or if these are part of the mine, if these are like prospect holes where they were looking for gypsum. And we came in here in a little inflatable boat, which I'm hoping is still here. Yep, I see it there, okay. The tide is going out. We have the little boat anchored, but we don't want to wait here too long because there's a huge tide flat outside of this little creek entrance. And once that starts to go dry, we would have a long way to carry that boat, so I'd prefer not to do that. But I'll take a minute to check out these caves. And it must be a salmon creek because they're a little salmon fry. Luckily, nobody's spawning right now, or there would probably be bears around. There might still be bears around, but we haven't seen anybody yet on this trip, so that's nice. I guess it's nice. It'd be nice to see some bears, but not like too close. A few of us are packing just in case we encounter some fuzzy friends. We have some backup. I've never had to use that. I've packed a gun around in Alaska when I grew up here for bears, and never had to use it. I think I had to fire a warning shot once or twice from the deck of the house, but yeah, you don't really have to worry about them too much. You just yell at them and they run off. This might be some of the gypsum rock. It's pretty soft. We've got a great big cave up here. We're trying to figure out how to get up to it without going through all the Devil's Club. If you're not familiar with Southeast Alaska, this is Devil's Club, and it's called that because, well, you can probably see why it's called that. Super spiky. This is another plant that you don't want to get into. I believe cow parsnip is one of the names. It has several names, but this, if you get the sap on you, makes you really photosensitive, and then you sunburn on a cloudy day with that stuff. Oh yeah, that actually goes in a ways. This looks like a mix of limestone and then, yeah, I can't tell how much is gypsum. I think the white stuff is gypsum, but I'm not seeing as much of it in here. And again, this could have been a natural cave that was enlarged by the miners looking for gypsum or other minerals. Yeah, it looks like this is the end of it. There are a lot of interesting minerals in here. I might have my fluorescent flashlight. See if I can find that. Yeah, this is as far as it goes. I've got the UV flashlight out, and oh yeah. Yeah, there's some fluorescent stuff in here, kind of bluish. Oh yeah, there's quite a bit up here. That's really cool. Let's see, I've got another wavelength on this light. That's about the same, I guess. But back in here, yeah, there's some kind of fluorescent blue stuff. That's pretty fun. Oh yeah, okay. There's quite a bit right here. Fluoresces blue. So we've got a few more of these caves along the creek bank. I was going to take photos of these, but my phone battery died, so just got this camera. Okay, this one goes back a little farther, and yeah, oh yeah, okay. It actually has a little loop that goes through out to the surface there. And then, wow, what's all this black stuff? There's this weird black goo and some reddish stuff. I'm going to get my other light out. The UV isn't doing anything in here. Yeah, this is like tar. It's like tar seeping out of that hole up there. Weird, okay. And then, yeah, somebody's been digging, somebody or something has been digging in this reddish dirt. There's another cave passage back there. That is too small for me. I am not crawling in there. I don't think there's a bear in there, but there could be a mink. I don't really want to fight a mink in a hole. Yeah, that keeps going somewhere. I can't tell how far that goes. This could be something's little den, like an animal could have come back and dug this out to sleep in, an otter or somebody. And the tide comes right up into this cave. You can see the high tide line. So, Yeah, going back out, there's these cool rock formations. My camera is not happy about the light balance. See if I can slip and fall. Got my nice high traction, extra tough boots on, but it's still possible I could eat it and fall down into the river, creek. Yeah, I do like these little kind of karst formations. These are great. Just all kinds of good little holes and crevices, and this might have been a cave that collapsed. That's cool. Yeah, there's another little cave up here. Most of these, I don't think most of these are very big, but this might have been a bigger one that then collapsed to the surface. Some little holes off to the side. All right, here's another little cave. Somebody's been living in that one. There's some gear up there. There's like a sleeping bag or something and a little climbing rope. All right, I am not going to try to go up there with the camera. I would just wipe out. Stefan went up there and said there's mostly just trash and more of that blue tarp. There's more railroad track in the creek here. That's probably pretty hard to see. Yeah, like and subscribe if you want to see me wipe out on the rocks, but I grew up walking on this stuff, so I'm probably fine, I say, as I tempt fate. Here's another little hole. This one is really cool. This looks like gypsum, all this white stuff. It actually almost looks like fossils, like little tube worms. And all right, I came up inside this little gypsum alcove cave just to look at all the patterning. This is really cool. It's yeah, it's just really neat the way this is made. It's all this conglomerate stuff. Trying the UV light again. There are some little patches of blue here and there. Oh yeah, there's quite a bit of blue. Okay. Okay. I really can't tell what all this is. I assume this is gypsum because that's what's here. And I know there were gypsum prospects. The main mine was a mile back in the woods, but there were some prospects along the beach here. That could be what some of this is. Again, it's too light really to make much out with the UV light. All right, before we leave, here's kind of the wide shot of the boat and the creek coming down. And then out into Alaskan Cove. These pilings are part of the old railroad grade. So this is where the railroad came down and went out into the cove. And you can kind of see where the loading dock was. Out there was the ore dock. So they would bring the gypsum out there and bring in ships or barges and load it. This is about all that's left of the railroad track. I have a historic image of this exact shot right here. So I'll do an overlay of what this exact shot looked like back when the mine was in operation and the railroad was in operation, of the train coming up that trestle. Yeah, that's what it looked like. And out there you can see the boat that we rented to get here. That is a 42-foot Nordic tug rented from Auk Bay Adventures. And we'll probably have a couple videos of our trip, including a tour of the boat if you're interested in that. All right, so that was the old ghost town and ghost train of Gypsum, Alaska, and some of the caves. And yeah, that's about all there is out here. So we're gonna move on to the next spot before our boat runs out of tide. And yeah, if you enjoyed this video, stay tuned. We will have more exploring videos from this Alaska trip, some more history videos, and all kinds of stuff. So thanks to everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time. There's more railroad track.